The image tag is used to include images on your web pages. In this lesson, we will explore how to use the image tag to embed or include images on our web pages. Before we start, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to make sure that you catch all tutorials as they come out. So far, we have focused mainly on inserting text into our web pages using tags like h1p.ul, which is the unordered list tag, etc. Of course, text is not the only thing that can be added into a web page. You can add a number of other medias such as images, videos, PDFs, etc. In fact, you can even add entire web pages to your own web page. In this lesson, we will start exploring multimedia on the web, starting with images. Let's head right over to our source code editor and start exploring how to practically add images into our web pages. Right, as is our custom, when we start off on web pages, we first create our skeleton. I keep on doing this thing in front of your eyes because I want you to get used to it. So I'm trying to brainwash you. Learn HTML, the head element, the body element. This must be a part of your... Okay. Stop the weirdness. Title, okay. Let's see, title. Well, we'll call it images in HTML. Then I'll do the same thing. H1, let's say images in HTML. I'll just keep it simple. Now we're saving it. So you notice that there's already an image inside this folder where I'm going to save the HTML document. So this is the image that we're going to use. So I'll just save it as index.html. Save. All right. So how do you install or insert rather an image into your web document? You do this by using the image tag. In a previous lesson, we touched on the image, that is img tag, a little bit as we're demonstrating how you can, you don't only have to use text as for a hyperlink, you can use images and other things. So we use the image a little bit, but that lesson was not focusing on actual images, whereas in this lesson we will focus a little bit more on the image tag. Okay, so that's the image tag. It's an empty element, that is to say, unlike for instance h1 that has an opening and a closing tag with content inside of it. This element just has the header. Of course, remember we spoke about how not the header, it only has the opening tag rather, and we spoke about how empty elements you can sometimes put this / to kind of like close them off. But yeah, it's an empty element, it has no content in it, but instead, so given this tag now, of course, if you just put this this does not mean anything in and of itself. You then have to specify one required attribute, which is called src, which is short for source. Now in source, you then specify where the image can be found. So that is to say the URL of the image. Now since our image, which is over here, is in the same folder as index, we can then go ahead and say blue rose.jpg. Save that. And then if we come over here and open our page, and there we go. Whoa, it is so huge. Wow. I downloaded a high resolution image. So what I'm going to do just quickly, let's actually just edit this. What do I want to use to edit it? Let's use I don't know. Let's use GIMP. right? Okay, so GIMP has the ability to shrink stuff, so I'll click that. By the way, GIMP is you can download this off the internet for free. You don't have to pay for it. So I'll start shrink. We'll say we want the width to be, I don't know, so let's make the width 400 pixels. Alright, scale. Hey, scale. There we go. And I think I can say image fit canvas to layer. There we go. And then say override blue rose. Keep the quality at 100%. In fact, wait. Let me rather say export as, and I'll say blue rose small. Yeah, let's do that. Let's keep our high definition image. Export. Okay. There we go. Okay. So we come back over here and we say small. Oopsie. This is the smaller version. Refresh. And there we go. So there is our image. So as we said, what is required? The image tag and then the source attribute. And then you specify the image. Now, of course, as I mentioned earlier on, usually when you are creating a website, what you want to do is you want to organize things. So for instance, you would typically create a folder that is called something like images, and then you would grab all of your images and put it inside that folder. And then of course, when you then reference it here, when you want to embed it or include it in your web page, you then have to go images / which means inside images. That's where you'll find the image. Then if we refresh, there we go, it's still found. Now, furthermore, you can even add images, not just from your own website, but you can add images into your web page from other websites. So I already went and found a URL for an image from some website, which I'm going to paste over here. So again, this is a URL to an image from another website. This image is .pixels.com website. So let's actually just copy this URL and come paste it over here. So that's the image. See, when we come to the browser and paste it here, we can see what the image is. So using this image's URL from this website, we have put it in here. So this should then allow that image to be included in our own web page. So let's make sure we've saved, come over here and refresh, and there we have it. That image from that website is now included in our own web page. Now, there's something that I must mention concerning including images from other websites. It's something that you want to try to avoid unless, number one, you know for a fact that the image that you are using, for instance, this image, I know for a fact that it comes from a website that says you are allowed to use all the images on their website. So if that's not the case, you shouldn't use websites from other people because there are copyright issues. People can actually come after you if you just randomly use their images without them giving you explicit permission to use their images. That's the first issue. The second issue is that if these people, let's say the people who run this website, let's come again over here and paste this here. If these people, for whatever reason, they decide to, let's say, remove this image from their website. Now, if they do that, and now all of a sudden you're still referencing it in your own website, then all of a sudden this image is going to stop working. I mean, it won't be there because it's not there in the website that you are referencing in your own web page. So we can kind of like simulate this by giving this thing a wrong name. Save it, come over here, And there we go. So something like this would happen. Do you see this small thing over here? That small thing, that's what the image is supposed to be. That's what appears when you are referencing an image or trying to include an image in your own website that is no longer found in that location where you are referencing. So since you don't have any control over a third-party website, you want to try to avoid using their images. Even when you now have permission to use it, what you would want to do is you would want to download this image. There you go, save image as, download it into your own website, and then from there reference it like this. As you saw that this image is actually it's actually here downloaded into our own PC, or it would be uploaded into your own website, and as a result then you'd be certain that the image will always be there. So generally you want to avoid referencing images from other people's websites, and even when it comes from your own website, don't use like the URL form, that is to say this public URL. Reference it like this, because if you do this, then I'll explain in a later lesson perhaps why. In fact, maybe let me touch on this a bit, because you know what happens when you provide a URL. It goes, the internet or the World Wide Web has to go and say, okay, this URL, where is this PC located? So it has to basically transform this readable URL into what is called an IP address, or a number which represents the computer where this website is found, and then go and then find the image. So there are a couple of steps that go into doing this, whereas if you just reference it like this, it'll be much easier for the browser to quickly find, because it knows that, okay, I know for a fact that this image is in the same place as this web page, so I don't need to go and try and figure out where it's coming from. So long story short, though you can do this, I'm just showing you for, so that you know, generally this is how you reference images on your web pages. All right, let's undo what we did over here. Then let's just refresh. Okay, so that's back up. Because next we're going to actually do what I did again, and for that matter, for demonstrative purposes, what I'm going to do is I keep on teasing you with CSS. I'm going to just force all of my images to all have a width of 400 pixels. So using the style tag, which then allows me to write some CSS rules. So say width 400 pixels. Refresh. Okay. So all of my images are 400 pixels, and secondly, I want for there to be space between these two images. So I will say I want them to come below each other. So I'm going to add 2BR. Again, the BR element. It's raining so much. I hope that doesn't interfere with my audio too much. Anyways, the BR element says okay, break line or skip line is the same as hitting the enter key. That's the effect of it. So it's like me adding 2 BR elements in the browser. It'll appear as though I've entered I've pressed the enter key 2 times, or rather, yeah. Okay. So let's come over here, refresh, and there we go. So now the next attribute that I want us to look into is an attribute called alt, or the alternative text attribute. So what the alternative text attribute does is that it is used for cases whereby, let's say, for whatever reason, the image is not able to be loaded by a browser. either because the person has went to their browser settings and they've disabled images, or it's a browser that by default does not display images, or as is the case as we're going to demonstrate, let's say the person, the image is no longer, let's say you reference that image and it's no longer in that location where you referenced it from. As we saw before, when we changed this, that image, the image became like this small thing, and then it just looks ugly. So what you would do is, if you have an alt, so you would, in the alt, you would describe what the image is about. So for instance, in this case, what would we say this is? This is the beach with a slightly cloudy sky. Yeah, beautiful beach with lightly cloudy sky. I think maybe let's call it let's call it that. So we'd say a beautiful beach with a lightly cloudy sky. Yeah, let's call our alt that. Now, if you come and refresh under normal circumstances, nothing will happen. But let's say for whatever reason now this image cannot be downloaded. So again, we'll simulate this by providing a wrong URL. So now let's refresh. And there we go. So now, in as much as it's still showing you that there's supposed to be an image over here, it also shows you the text that describes the image. So that's the first reason why. That's the first reason why you want to almost always include an alt attribute for your images. That's the first reason. The second reason is that web browsers that are designed, or software that's designed to allow visually impaired or blind people to browse the internet. So you know that we know that there are text readers, that is to say, whereby a program goes through the text and then reads it out, usually with a voice like a beautiful beach with a lightly cloudy sky, or some weird voice like that. So when you provide an alt, so when a blind person is visiting your website and then they are going through it, the reader or web reader is going through it to say images in HTML, it goes through the text. When it gets to an image, because of course a blind person cannot see an image, what it will then do is that it will actually read the alt, what the text that's written in the alt attribute of that particular image. So I think that's quite a compelling reason why you would want to always include the alt reason. The alt attribute. And then the third reason is that actually search engines such as Google, when they crawl through your website so that they know, okay, what's the content of this website, so that they know how to store you in their database, so that people, when they search, and let's say a person searches for whatever they're searching for, they also go through images and they look in the alt. So for instance, in this case, if Google were to, let's say this was actually a page on my website somewhere that's on the internet, and then I instruct Google that please go through my web pages so that you can include them in search results. When it's called the process is called crawling through your website. That's what a Google program called a bot does. In any case, so it will get your images and read the alt attribute, and then it sees a beautiful beach with lightly cloudy sky. So now when a person goes on Google and then they search for beautiful beach, then your image would also appear. And of course, we know how Google works. When, let's actually just do this. If I say beautiful beach, and then I come over to images, you see these images, they are appearing here. And when you click here and go visit, and then Google is able to see them. So I mean, these images here can even allow people to get to your website. So it's one way of making sure that even perhaps a person can end up arriving at your website through your image, which has been named, which has been, you followed the right rules when you were creating a web page of giving the alt attribute, your images, etc. So you really want to include, I think that's the point that I'm trying to make, is that whenever you are using the image tag to include an image on your web page, you want to always include the alt. I've given 3 reasons. The first reason is that if the image is no longer available for whatever reason, the alt text will be shown. Second reason is that devices or browsers that are designed for the blind, when it gets to an image, it reads out the alt, what's written in the alt attribute. So you want to actually give a proper description in the alt attribute. Then thirdly, for search engines such as Google, they look through your alt so that they can gain an idea of what is this image about, so that they can show it up in search results that include images properly. So include the alt attribute. The next attribute we're going to look into is the title attribute. So let's first undo this. Was it that? No, I don't remember. That's okay, cool. Yeah. So, and I'll just put this here for cleanliness. So the next attribute, as I said, is the title attribute. Now, when we're dealing with links, we spoke a bit about the title attribute. It allows you, when the user hovers over your image, for them to see text that gives them an idea of what the image is about. An image should be self-explanatory, but sometimes a person needs maybe a little bit of context. So for instance, I'll just use the alt as an example. So let's say we did that and then we refresh. Now see that when you hover over it, it gives you a bit of information about the image. So that's the title attribute. Now, generally, as far as images are concerned, it's not that much advised for you to rely much on the title as something that gives context or a bit of information about an image, for a number of reasons, such as, for instance, if a person is using a computer that does not have a mouse for whatever reason, or when a person is using, a touch screen device, you can't really quite hover over things when you're dealing with a touch screen device. So it's not really a high accessibility or highly accessible feature. So instead, what you'd want to do is you would want to add a caption underneath your image, which then will nicely bring us to to our next topic concerning images, how to properly caption an image. So how do you go about captioning an image? Well, there's one way in which you could do this. Let's say, in fact, I'm going to put away now this image. Let's put away this image. We'll deal with just this one. Add an alt that says a blue rose, because that's what this is. I think it's a beautiful rose as well. A beautiful blue rose. Title, that's fine. We'll leave the title. So what we do is, one way of doing it is we could use a div. Now the div element, it just says, it defines a block of space. It's a block element. When we say an element is a block element, that is to say it will occupy, like, it won't have another element next to it. It occupies the whole line. So whatever was before it will be above it, and whatever is after it will be below it by force. So when we add the image over here, whatever is after it, it'll be below it, and whatever is above it, it'll be it'll appear above it. It won't be next to it. So we could do this, and then we can then maybe use something like either another div in here, or maybe a paragraph, and then we could say a beautiful blue rose, and then when we refresh, there we go, that other image is gone, and then we've captioned it, and maybe it would be something like figure 1, a beautiful blue rose. Or as I said, maybe we could use another div over here. There you go, figure 1, because a paragraph, you notice the difference when it was a paragraph. There's a bit of space, because a paragraph by default has a little bit of space above it and a little bit of space below it. So now maybe we like, we want to use a div. So this would be one way of adding a caption to your image. And then as you can see now, everyone who is going through this, they don't have to have, in order for them to get a little bit of information about what's the context behind this image, they can read right directly there. That's one way of doing it. But a more proper way of doing it, as we said, there are a lot of HTML elements, and you want to give yourself time to go through to go through them. There are a number of websites that give you a reference to all the HTML5 elements. HTML5 is the latest version. It's the latest version of HTML. So there are websites that give you all the HTML elements that are available out there, and as you give yourself time to browse through them, you'll get to realize that, oh, actually there's a element that is designed for the specific thing that I want to do. For instance, as far as images are concerned, such an element is an element called the figure element. So what you would want to do is you would want to create a figure element, and then include your image inside the figure element, and then there's a companion element, if I may call it that, that's called figcaption element. Figcaption, and then that is where you would then go and put your caption. So I'll remove this. So this would be a more proper way of you adding an image and captioning it if you want to caption your image. So we'll save that and come and refresh. And there we go. There's your image, and it's captioned. It's captioned, and you are now using HTML the way in which it is supposed to be used. So that's really much that's where we will end as far as images are concerned. So that's our introduction to multimedia. You can imagine how boring the internet would be, or the World Wide Web would be, if all web pages were just text. We are very thankful that it's not just text. And by the way, in the early days of the World Wide Web, web pages were exactly that. They were only text. But fortunately, it took just a few years immediately after the World Wide Web was invented in the early 90s. It just took them about I think 2 or so years for the web browsers which were at play at that time to start to introduce the image tag and start using it, and then subsequently including other tags which allow for the inclusion of other multimedia things such as videos, PDFs, etc., which we're going to cover in the following lessons. But that is the end of this lesson concerning images. You can add an image using the image tag, and then you provide where that image is found using the source tag. Then you want to also include an alt or an alternative text tag that will be displayed in the event of the image not being able to shown. And the alternative text is also useful for people who are blind, who use programs that allow them to go through web pages. When they get your image, the program will read out what's contained in the alt attribute. And as well as for search engines such as Google, they will look at your image tags alt attribute, and then they will index that, so that when people are searching for things, if your particular thing, or if a person, for instance, searches for blue rose, and you have a web page that has an image and then an alt which specifies that, okay, this is a picture about a blue rose, your image will most probably show up in Google search results. But of course, you remember you're competing with millions of other web pages, so factor that in. But it will definitely be indexed, and chances of it showing up are much higher if you always include a proper alt attribute. And then, of course, when you want to caption your images, use the figure element, put your image inside, and then below that you then include the figcaption element, which is where you will then put your caption. And that brings us to the end of our lesson concerning images. Next up, we'll learn how to add audio and video into our web pages. Over and out.
You can watch other tutorials over here, and most importantly, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss out on tutorials as they come out. Have you subscribed? Are you done? Okay, cool.